Hey guys! So today, we're diving into one of the wildest topics I've ever covered in near-death experiences. You know those moments where everything slows down, your heart drops, and you seriously think, welp, this is it? Yeah, we're talking about those. These stories are crazy. Sometimes a little funny in hindsight, sometimes bone-chilling. And the craziest part? They're all real, or at least, they feel real to the people who lived through them. Before we jump in, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And hey, if you have a near-death story of your own, you know we want to hear it. Type it up down below and maybe it'll end up in a future episode. All right, let's get into it. So, a couple of years ago, I was driving home from a late shift at work. It was about 2:30 in the morning. Remembered because I glanced at the clock right before everything went sideways. I was taking this back road shortcut through a wooded area. Super quiet, no lights, barely even any houses out there. Just trees, a narrow 2-lane road, and the occasional deer sign. I wasn't speeding, just cruising along, music low, windows cracked, because it had that crisp autumn chill in the air. Then I saw it. A car flipped on its side in the middle of the road. No flashing lights, no people, just ... there. Upside down. Smoke gently rising from the hood. I slammed on the brakes, heart immediately racing. My first instinct was to jump out and help. What if someone was trapped? But then something about it felt off. The way the car was sitting, perfectly balanced on its side, no skid marks on the road, no broken glass, no debris. It looked placed. Almost like a movie prop. Still, I pulled over and put my hazards on, just in case another driver came through and didn't see it in time. That's when I noticed movement. Not from inside the car, from the woods. Just to the left. 2 people stepped out, slowly. They were both wearing masks. Not medical masks, those plastic party store kinds. One looked like a clown, the other was some weird pig snout thing. I'm not kidding. I didn't even think. I threw my car in reverse so fast I nearly backed into a tree. They didn't run or chase me. They just stood there, completely still, right by the edge of the trees, watching. I drove in reverse for a solid 30 feet before I turned and tore out of there, going way faster than I should have. I called the police when I finally hit a signal again, gave them the general location, and they promised to send someone out. What? When I checked in the next day, nothing. They said they found no sign of an accident, no overturned vehicle, no reports of anything unusual. To this day, I don't know if I interrupted something, or if I was meant to. Whatever it was, I think about it every time I drive alone at night, especially on back roads. But what really gets me is that eerie calm they had. Like they weren't surprised to see me at all, like I was part of the plan. Anyway, let's switch gears for a second, because the next story is just as intense. But in a totally different way, more of a your body betrays you and almost kills you type deal. This one happened out of nowhere. In the middle of a grocery store. Alright, this one still gives me chills, not because of anything supernatural, but because it reminded me how fast life can flip on you. No warning, no build-up. 1 minute you're picking out cereal, the next you're staring at the ceiling, wondering if you're going to make it. So I was at the grocery store, midweek, middle of the day, just running errands like normal. I'd skipped breakfast that morning, so I figured I'd reward myself with a donut from the bakery section while I shopped. Grabbed one of those sugar-coated ones with the raspberry filling, ate it while I wandered through produce. No big deal. About 10 minutes later, I'm in the dairy aisle, comparing yogurt labels. I start feeling ... weird. At first it was just a tightness in my chest. Nothing sharp, more like pressure, like someone was sitting on me. Then my arms went numb. Then my vision started doing that tunnel thing, like everything was dimming from the outside in. And here's the messed up part. My first thought wasn't, I'm dying. It was, I hope I don't cause a scene. I remember grabbing the handle of the freezer for support, and the cold metal felt so distant, like it wasn't even real. I tried to take a breath and couldn't. It was like my lungs just gave up. I slumped to the floor and I could hear someone nearby saying, ma'am, are you okay? And I wanted to answer. I did, but my mouth wouldn't work. My body wasn't responding. That's when I blacked out. Apparently, I had a full-blown anaphylactic reaction. Turns out, I developed a sudden allergy to something in that donut either, the raspberry, or some kind of preservative. I'd eaten them before, never had an issue. But that day, my immune system went DEFCON 1. I woke up in the ambulance with an oxygen mask and a paramedic shouting my name over and over. The first thing I remember clearly was the sound of the siren. It felt like it was coming from inside my skull. Then the adrenaline kicked in, and I started shaking all over. They gave me a shot of epinephrine and told me if I'd gotten to the hospital even a few minutes later, I might not have made it. My airway was nearly closed by the time they intubated me. Freak allergy. From a grocery store donut. That's how close I came to dying that day. And now, I carry an EpiPen everywhere. I don't eat anything unless I know exactly what's in it. I'm that person at the restaurant now, and I'm not sorry, because one bite nearly ended me. It's funny how we think of death as something that comes barreling at us in dramatic ways, like a car crash or a robbery. But sometimes it's just a donut. And speaking of car crashes, this next one is actually about someone who should have died in one. I'm talking metal, twisted like paper, airbags failed, the whole 9 yards. But somehow, they walked away. Let me tell you how that happened. Alright, so this happened when I was about 22. Still in college, still driving the same beat-up Honda Civic I'd had since high school. It had no AC, a cassette player instead of a radio, and the kind of brakes that squeaked even when you weren't pressing them. But it was mine, and it got me where I needed to go. I was heading back to campus after visiting my parents one weekend. The drive was about 2 hours, mostly highway. It was raining not hard. Just that annoying, steady drizzle that makes the roads slick but doesn't quite justify pulling over. I remember I was listening to an audiobook, something sci-fi and weird, and kind of zoning out in that autopilot way you do when you've driven the same road 100 times. Then a semi-truck in the next lane over started drifting. Not a ton, just a slow, steady creep into my lane. At first I thought maybe the driver didn't see me, so I laid on the horn, thinking they'd snap out of it and swerve back. They didn't. The front end of the truck caught my rear bumper, and that was it. I lost control instantly. My car spun fully, tire screeching, movie-style spin across 3 lanes of traffic. I remember seeing headlights coming toward me, then the median, then the sky. It all happened in these weird, jumbled flashes. Everything was loud. Everything was fast. And then I hit the guardrail, head on. The sound was unreal. Steel folding, glass shattering, that hollow thump your body makes when it slams into the seatbelt at full force. The airbag never deployed. No joke, it should have. But it didn't, and yet somehow I didn't break a single bone. I sat there in shock, gripping the steering wheel like I was still driving, while other cars started pulling over around me. A couple people ran up yelling, asking if I was okay, and I just kept nodding, even though I couldn't feel my hands. My brain was stuck somewhere between did I just die, and why does my audiobook keep playing? The EMTs showed up within 10 minutes. They checked me out, put me on a stretcher, but after a full exam at the hospital, just some bruised ribs and whiplash. Everyone who saw the crash said the same thing. I shouldn't have walked away from that. The angle of the hit, the speed, the fact that I spun into oncoming traffic and didn't get T-boned all made 0 sense. The police officer who took my statement even said, "You've got someone watching over you." I didn't believe in that kind of stuff before. I'm not saying I do now. Exactly. But that experience left me wondering. To this day, I think about how close I was to being another roadside cross and bouquet of plastic flowers. 1 inch, 1 second, one slightly different angle, and that would have been it. Now every time I drive in the rain, I grip the wheel a little tighter. I keep my eyes peeled for semis. I always make sure my airbags work. Next story. This one's a little less mechanical, a little more biological. 'Cause what do you do when your own brain tries to kill you? And the worst part? You don't even see it coming. This one still freaks me out to think about because it started so normally. No warning signs, no dramatic build-up, just a regular day. I was 29, working from home, eating relatively healthy, not under much stress, or at least I didn't think I was. I'd just finished lunch, leftover stir-fry, and a banana, and was sitting on the couch with my laptop, answering emails. I remember reading this one message that annoyed me, something about a client pushing a deadline up again. Then all of a sudden, the words on the screen stopped making sense. I don't mean I forgot how to read. I mean, the letters looked like letters, but they weren't forming words. It was like trying to read a language I'd never seen before, but I knew it was English. I blinked, shook my head, even stood up and stretched, thinking maybe my contacts were dry or something. Then the left side of my face went numb. I mean, completely. My mouth drooped. I could still see out of my left eye, but blinking felt like it took forever, like time slowed down on just that side of my body. And when I tried to call for help, my voice came out garbled, like I was drunk or dreaming. That's when it hit him. I think I'm having a stroke. Somehow, through what must have been pure adrenaline, I managed to grab my phone and mash the emergency call button. I remember the operator's voice calm, steady, asking me to stay on the line, but everything was fading. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the phone. The last thing I remember was slumping to the floor and seeing the living room sideways like the world had just tilted. I woke up in the ICU a day later. They told me I'd had what's called a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. Blood clot in the brain, most likely stress-induced, though they never found the exact trigger. If the clot had stayed a few minutes longer, permanent brain damage, or worse. But because I called when I did, because the paramedics reached me within that golden window, they were able to give me meds to break up the blockage. No surgery, no paralysis, just a few lingering headaches and a lifetime supply of anxiety. I had to go through weeks of follow-up tests, Mr. Is, heart monitors, blood work, everything. The doctor said I was one of the lucky ones. That whole ordeal reset my life. I started eating differently. I quit caffeine. I meditate, and I never thought I'd be that guy, but here we are. I even switched careers to something lower stress, even if it pays a little less. Because once your brain goes offline, even for a second, it's like someone flipped the lights off in your house, and you realize just how fragile everything is. Anyway, speaking of situations where you feel totally helpless, the next story is about one of the scariest things that can happen when you're far from help, lost in the woods, alone, and suddenly realizing something's watching you. And trust me, this wasn't a bear or a hiker or anything I've ever been able to explain. This happened a few years ago when I decided to go hiking solo, something I'd done a bunch of times before. No big deal. I wasn't deep in the wilderness or anything. It was a well-marked trail in a national park, about a 6-mile loop, mostly flat, with good cell reception for most of it.
I always carried the basics: water, snacks, flashlight, first aid kit, and a whistle. I even told a friend my route and when I'd be back.
It started off peaceful. Cool morning, leaves crunching underfoot, birds overhead, no one else around. I passed maybe 2 other hikers early on, but after the 2nd mile, it got quiet, not eerie, just still serene. Around mile 4, I took a break at this small clearing off the main trail. There was a large boulder, perfect for sitting. I had a protein bar, drank some water, checked my phone, no new messages, 1 bar of service. I sat there maybe 10 minutes. That's when I started getting that feeling. You know, the one like someone's behind you watching, not just near you, but focused on you. It started subtle, a small tingle in my neck, that little twist in your gut that says you're not alone. I slowly turned and scanned the trees. Nothing, just pine trunks, underbrush, and shadows. So I stood up, brushed off my pants, and started walking again, just a little faster than before. That's when I heard the first branch snap. It was loud, not like a twig breaking under a squirrel. It was something heavy, purposeful. I froze. Then another crack. Closer. I looked back and saw nothing, but I felt it. Like the forest was holding its breath. No wind, no birds, just silence. I started walking again, trying to stay calm, not run. You're not supposed to run when you feel followed in the woods makes. You pray. Every few steps, another crunch behind me. Whatever it wasn't trying to hide anymore. I pulled out my whistle and blew it hard. A sharp, shrill blast. It echoed through the trees. Nothing. Then movement. About 50 feet back, off the trail, I saw something shift between 2 trees. It wasn't a bear. Too tall. Not a person, either, unless that person was nearly 7 feet tall and moving weird. Kinda hunched, kinda gliding. I didn't wait to get a better look. I started jogging. Legs were jelly, hard in my throat, every instinct screaming at me to get out. I didn't stop until I hit the parking lot, red-faced and breathless, practically stumbling to my car. There were a few other hikers there now, chatting like nothing was wrong. I didn't say anything. Just got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there, trying to calm my breathing. Later that night, I looked up reports from that park. Figured maybe there were mountain lions, maybe a rogue bear, something explainable. But instead, I found a forum thread about hikers reporting similar feelings, being followed, watched, even chased. No confirmed sightings, no clear answers. Just accounts like mine, scattered over a few years. Whatever it was, I don't think it wanted to be seen. I don't think it liked me being there. I haven't hiked alone since. The next story, it's different, but still terrifying, because sometimes the threat isn't out in the wild. Sometimes it's hiding inside the walls of your own home. This one happened when I was living in a duplex with super thin walls and even thinner locks. I just moved in mid-20s, fresh off a breakup, trying to start over. The place was small, but affordable, and close to work. My landlord was some guy in his 60s who lived on the other side of the building, quiet, kept to himself. I barely saw him. At first, everything seemed fine. The unit was a little dated dillowed light switches, squeaky floorboards, but nothing creepy. I set up my stuff, decorated a bit, and slowly settled into a routine. But then little things started happening. It began with sounds at night, not the normal creaks and settling. This was different. I'd be in bed and hear what sounded like shuffling footsteps, slow, just beneath the hum of the fridge or the ticking of the wall clock. Always around 2 or 3 in the morning. I assumed it was the neighbor or maybe raccoons outside. I even bought white noise machines to drown it out. Then one day I came home and my kitchen window was open. Now, I never opened that window. It was sticky and jammed and had one of those old-school twist locks that barely worked. But there it was wide open, screen pushed outward like something had crawled out. I called the landlord. He brushed it off like it was nothing. Probably popped open from the heat, he said. Yeah, that window's always been tricky. Yeah, okay. But the weather had been cool all week. After that, I started locking my bedroom door at night. I know that sounds paranoid, but it made me feel better. And for a while, things calmed down. Until one night, I woke up around 2:15 to a very distinct sound. My bedroom door handle, turning, not fast, just a slow, deliberate jiggle, like someone was testing it. Quietly. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just lay there in the dark, heart pounding, clutching my phone under the covers. I didn't even dare look. After what felt like an eternity, the handle stopped. No footsteps, no creaks, just silence. I called the police from under the blanket, whispered everything I could. They showed up in 10 minutes, searched the whole unit, found nothing. But get this, they did find muddy footprints just inside the back door, which had been unlocked. That door led to a tiny fenced-in backyard I never used. I never unlocked that door. Ever. The cops couldn't find signs of forced entry, but they believed someone had been inside. Maybe more than once. I stayed with a friend for the rest of the week and moved out that month. Here's the creepiest part. A few months later, I read an article about my old landlord, arrested. Apparently, he had been secretly entering tenants' units through shared crawl spaces. In one case, he'd installed a hidden camera behind a vent. Another tenant caught him after setting up their own surveillance. No charges ever stuck, lack of evidence or some technicality, but he moved states after that. To this day, I can't sleep without locking every door. Even when I'm staying in hotels, I wedge a chair under the handle. And I never, ever assume I'm alone. All right, deep breath. That one always messes with me. Let's shake that off with something totally different. Still terrifying, but this next story, it's about a vacation gone wrong. Like, seriously wrong. The kind where paradise nearly turns into your last day on Earth. Okay, so this one happened a couple years ago, when I decided to finally take a proper vacation. I'd been working nonstop for months, late nights, 0 weekends, and I was running on fumes. So I splurged a little and booked a solo trip to Costa Rica. Beachfront Airbnb, surf lessons, fresh fruit, hammock on the balcony, you get the vibe. And for the first few days, it was perfect. I spent mornings hiking near waterfalls, afternoons sipping cold drinks by the beach, and evenings watching the sun melt into the ocean. I even made friends with a group of other solo travelers in Aussie. A Canadian and a German guy who looked like he'd just stepped out of an REIA dive. We all decided to go on this boat tour one day, one of those small group catamaran deals, where they take you snorkeling in a reef and then cruise around some remote islands. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, gentle waves, not too hot. But about halfway through the trip, the captain got a call on his radio. He went pale. That kind of pale. He turned the boat around abruptly. No announcement, no explanations, just started gunning it back toward shore. At first we thought it was a joke, maybe part of the tour. But then he yelled something in Spanish to the crew, and they started pulling in lines and telling us to sit down and hang on. That's when we noticed the clouds. Not overhead behind us, over the ocean. This black, boiling wall of sky just swallowing the horizon. Fast. Turns out, a tropical storm had formed unexpectedly off the coast and was moving in our direction at nearly 60 miles per hour. What should have been hours of warning had turned into minutes. The waves got big fast, like roller coaster big. We were getting tossed, water slamming into the side of the boat, people screaming. At one point, the Aussie guy got thrown halfway across the deck and nearly hit the railing. I grabbed onto a bench and locked my arms under it, teeth chattering not from cold, but from pure adrenaline. We were still 20 minutes from shore, and visibility dropped to nothing. Captain was on the radio the whole time, yelling coordinates, trying to figure out if any other boats were nearby. He told us to put on life vests, which, by the way, were stashed under the seats with no instructions. The German guy found them and started tossing them to everyone, barking orders like he'd been waiting for this exact scenario his whole life. Then came the worst part. We hit something. A loud, sickening crack under the hull, and the engine sputtered. The boat listed hard to the right, and water started sloshing over the deck. One of the crew members started handing out those little emergency flares, which I didn't even know they kept on tourist boats. I was 100% convinced we were about to capsize. The captain somehow got the motor running again, but barely. It was coughing and stuttering like it might quit at any second. Every wave felt like it might be the last one before we went under. Then, like a miracle out of nowhere, we saw the coast. It wasn't the same beach we launched from, but it was land. Civilization. The captain steered hard toward it, and we hit the shore like a car crash. We all jumped into knee-deep water and scrambled onto the sand, soaked, crying, bruised, so grateful. A local rescue crew was already waiting, having tracked the boat's radio. We were rushed to shelter, given warm blankets and hot drinks, and checked for injuries. Nobody died. Nobody even broke a bone. But I can still hear the sound of that crack beneath the boat, still feel the tilt and slam of those waves. And every time I see a perfectly sunny sky, I remember how fast it can change. They say the ocean is beautiful, but unforgiving. That day proved both. All right, next up something completely different, but just as intense. Because the next story, it involves a kid. It's not mine, not my sibling, just a random little kid at the grocery store who shouldn't have been there at all. How one weird glance probably saved someone's life. So this happened on a random Tuesday afternoon. I'd taken a half day from work. I'd stopped by the grocery store on the way home to pick up some stuff for dinner. Nothing unusual. Just a rotisserie chicken, a bag of salad, a frozen pizza for backup, and one of those guilty pleasure snack cakes I always tell myself I won't buy. The store wasn't crowded. It's mostly older folks, moms with strollers, a couple teenagers in pajamas picking through the energy drinks. I was walking through the freezer aisle when I saw this little kid, maybe 4 or 5 years old, just standing there by himself. He looked totally out of place. First of all, he wasn't dressed for the weather. It was late autumn, and he was barefoot, in a t-shirt and these super thin pajama bottoms. No coat, no shoes, no socks. His face was flushed, and his hair looked like he'd just woken up from a nap that went sideways. Now, I don't have kids, but something about this didn't sit right. I slowed down and kind of looked around, expecting a parent to come rushing up and say, "Oh, there you are." But no one did. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He was just still quiet, watching the freezers like they were showing a movie only he could see. I walked a little closer and gently said, "Hey, buddy, you okay? Where's your mom or dad?" He blinked slowly and looked up at me and said, completely calm, he told me not to move. Now listen, that chilled me right to the core. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. Like it wasn't weird, like he was following a very serious rule. I crouched down a little and asked, "Who told you not to move?" And he pointed down the aisle, toward the exit. There was a man walking away, slowly, hands in his pockets, hoodie pulled low. Something about the body language told me he did not belong to this kid. He didn't look back. Walked toward the sliding doors like it was nothing. That's when I did something I've never done before. I pulled out my phone and called the store manager before calling 911. I figured if the guy was really walking off with someone's kid or planning to, time mattered. To their credit, the staff responded fast. One employee came up and stayed with the boy while another ran to the exit and stopped the man. And here's the thing, he bolted. The moment they tried to talk to him, he ran. Floon sprinted out the doors and across the parking lot, disappeared behind the back of the strip mall. Police showed up less than 10 minutes later. They checked the security cameras and confirmed what we suspected. The kid wasn't with him when they entered. The man had followed the boy around the store, hovering near him in multiple aisles. They think he was waiting for the perfect moment to grab him and leave, but something spooked him. Maybe it was me talking to the kid. Maybe he realized the staff was watching. Whatever it was, he gave up. The little boy eventually remembered his mom's phone number, and they were able to reunite them. She'd been in the restroom for just a couple minutes and had told her older daughter, who was 12, to keep an eye on him. But the girl had wandered off to look at cereal or something. And in those few short minutes, everything nearly went horribly wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about that sentence for days. He told me not to move. Because that man clearly knew what he was doing. He'd made it sound like a game, like a challenge. Stay right there, don't move, like playing freeze tag, except it wasn't a game at all. After that, I started noticing little things more. How easy it is for a kid to vanish, how vulnerable they are, and how 1 second of hesitation, on my part or the staff's motive, changed the outcome completely. Anyway, let's switch gears again. This next one is weird, like surreal weird. So have you ever known something was about to happen before it actually did? Yeah, same. This next story is about a dream that came true. Literally. Okay, so let me preface this by saying I'm not someone who usually puts stock in premonitions or dreams that mean something. I don't own crystals. I don't read horoscopes. I've never had a psychic reading. I'm the kind of person who, when something weird happens, looks for the boring explanation first. But this shook me. So I had this dream one night, a vivid one. It's the kind that clings to you the next morning like static. In the dream, I was driving down a highway I didn't recognize. It was dusk. I was alone in the car, and the sky had this deep orange glow, like a storm was coming or just passed. Then, out of nowhere, I heard tires screeching. In the dream, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw headlights swerving hard to hard. Silver SUV came flying into the lane behind me, lost control, and spun out. I watched it tumble once, then twice, before it smashed into a guardrail and flipped onto its roof. I woke up immediately, heart racing. It was 3:47 a.m. I remembered the time exactly because I checked my phone. The dream felt so real I actually got up and wrote it down, something I never do. I typed it into my notes app word for word. Now here's where it gets freaky. That weekend, I was driving to visit family about 4 hours away. It's a route I don't normally take, and part of it runs through this stretch of unfamiliar highway just past a state border. About 2 hours in, the sky started turning that same burnt orange from the dream. Just a coincidence, I told myself. Just a sunset. Then I realized I was on that road. Same sloping turn, the same tree line, the same warped green sign on the shoulder. It was exactly like the dream. I felt my stomach knot up. I slowed down and pulled into the right lane. Shh. And just as I passed the next bend, I heard tires screech. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw a silver SUV weaving back and forth behind me, trying to overtake someone. It clipped the side of a sedan, spun out, and slammed hard into the center divider. It didn't flip like in the dream, thank God. But it did spin and land facing the wrong direction. Smoke poured out of the hood. Other cars screeched to a stop. I pulled over and called 911 while running back to check on the driver. They were shaken, but alive. Airbags had gone off. A cracked windshield, but no serious injuries. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. I stood there on the side of the highway, the sky glowing orange above us, that weird metallic smoke smell in the air, thinking I saw this. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, frame for frame, exactly this. I later pulled up the note I had written the night of the dream. The timestamp showed it was 3 days earlier, at 3:47 a.m., just like I remembered. I don't have an explanation. I don't pretend to. But ever since that day, I pay attention to my dreams. Not all of them most are just brain noise. But when one hits me in the chest like that, I don't brush it off anymore. All right, coming up next, going underground. Literally. Because the next story involves an abandoned tunnel system, late night dare, and something that maybe wasn't entirely human. This one happened back when I was in college. Went to a smallish university in a town that was older than it looked, one of those places with weird old buildings, hidden histories, and more than its share of campus ghost stories. You know the type. Anyway, there was this rumor about a tunnel system underneath one of the original lecture halls. Supposedly, it connected to the old heating plant and a few of the maintenance buildings from back in the early 1900s. The tunnels had been sealed off years ago after a fire, or a collapse depending on which version of the story you believed, but every once in a while, someone would claim they'd found an entrance. Most people chalked it up to campus legends. Until one night, friend Jason actually did find one. We were hanging out at his apartment on a Friday night, nothing crazy, just pizza, bad movies, and avoiding homework. Around midnight, he leans in all conspiratorial and says, "Okay, don't freak out. But I found an old metal door behind the boiler room in Hammond Hall." We all groaned. Another one of his stories. At. But then he pulls out his phone and shows us a video. At. And sure enough, there's a rusted out door, half covered in ivy, set into the brick wall behind the basement boilers. He even filmed himself cracking it open. Behind it, a narrow concrete tunnel, totally dark. Dust floating in the flashlight beam like snow. Of course we had to go. We waited until after 2 a.m. when the janitors were gone. Slipped in through the side entrance of Hammond. Snuck down past the rattling boilers, and found the door exactly where Jason said it would be. We pried it open. The hinges let out this horrible groan like metal screaming. Inside, it smelled like wet stone and rust. The tunnel stretched forward maybe 30 feet before turning sharply left. We took turns shining our phones into the darkness. "Nope," my friend Katie said. "Absolutely not." Jason and I, on the other hand, were already stepping through. The walls were narrow, just wide enough to walk single file land, lined with old electrical conduit and frayed wires that probably hadn't carried current in decades. The floor sloped downward slightly, and the deeper we went, the colder it got. After about 50 yards, we came to a small chamber like a maintenance nook. There was an old desk, a broken stool, and a cracked porcelain mug still sitting there, like someone had just set it down. We were laughing nervously, trying to guess what the place was used for storage, maybe. A break room for the maintenance crew, when we heard it. A clicking sound, not electrical, not mechanical, organic, like someone popping their knuckles in the dark. Jason spun around with his flashlight. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, heart thudding. We stood frozen, listening. Then it came again, closer, echoing faintly off the tunnel walls. Click, 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 click. We started backing up, slowly, trying to keep our light trained in every direction at once. We couldn't tell where the sound was coming from. Ahead of us? Behind us? It seemed to bounce around, changing direction like it was moving. Then the light from Jason's phone caught something. Just for a second. Shape at the edge of the tunnel, low to the ground, pale. We all ran, full sprint back the way we came, shoving past each other in the narrow corridor, breath catching in our throats. The tunnel echoed with the sounds of our footsteps and, still behind us. Click, click. We burst out of the door, slammed it shut, and didn't stop running until we were out of Hammond Hall and back on the main quad under the streetlights. Katie was already threatening to call campus security, and Jason, who'd been laughing at first, looked pale as chalk. We went back the next morning in daylight. But the door? It was welded shut, like professionally sealed, as if someone had been waiting for us to find it. And didn't want to soar anyone else getting back in. None of us ever got a clear look at what was down there. We all saw something, but we remember it differently. Jason swears it was an animal, like a hairless dog or raccoon. I remember it taller long arms, crawling. Katie refuses to talk about it at all. All I know is, it wasn't supposed to be there. All right, deep breaths. Let's bring things back up above ground. Our next story is a little less eerie, but somehow just as terrifying. It's about a man who thought he was getting a routine Uber ride and instead got caught in someone else's getaway plan. This happened to me a couple of years ago on a Friday night. I'd gone out for dinner with a few coworkers after a long week, had a couple drinks, not enough to be drunk, just enough that I knew I shouldn't be driving. So I ordered an Uber to take me home. Nothing weird about that. The app showed a silver Toyota Corolla arriving in 4 minutes. Driver named Trey, 4.9 stars. He pulled up right on time. I checked the plates matched. The guy rolled down his window and gave a friendly wave. "You my name?" he asked. I nodded, hopped in the back seat, and off we went. Normal conversation at first. He asked if I had a good night where I worked, the usual small talk. But about 10 minutes in, he stopped talking, and I noticed wasn't following the route. Like at all. The app was showing a direct path to my apartment. But Trey had taken a weird turn a couple blocks ago, then another, and now we were heading toward the industrial part of town. Darker, fewer streetlights, warehouses, chain-link fences, boarded-up windows. I leaned forward and said, "Hey, I think the GPS is saying to turn left up here." He didn't answer, didn't even look at me in the mirror. I said his name a little louder, "Trey." And this time he snapped, "I just need to make a quick stop. Won't be long." Instant red flags. Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. I opened the Uber app to hit the emergency assistance button only to realize the app was no longer tracking the ride. It had ended. What? The driver had marked the ride as complete. I reached for the door handle. Locked. My heart was pounding now. I tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. I didn't realize it until later, but we were in a reception dead zone between warehouses. Classic horror movie stuff. We pulled into this empty lot behind a shuttered loading dock, and Trey turned the car off. Just sat there for a second, breathing heavy. Then he reached down beside his seat. I don't know what his plan was. A weapon? A second phone? Something worse? But I didn't wait to find out. I launched myself forward, grabbed the unlock switch, and kicked the back door open. I don't even remember getting out of the car, I just remember running. It's full-on sprint. No sense of direction, just away. I hurdled a pallet, ducked through a busted fence, and didn't stop until I found an open gas station about 4 blocks away. The attendant let me hide behind the counter while I called the real 911. Cops showed up, took my statement. But Trey? He wasn't Trey. The guy was using a stolen Uber account. Fake name, burner phone, everything. They caught him later that week trying to pull the same move with someone else. Turns out he'd been doing it for months. Still gives me chills. I don't take Ubers alone at night anymore. Or if I do, I double-check everything license plate name. Even ask them to confirm who they're picking up before I say a word. I don't care if I look paranoid. Sometimes being paranoid is just being prepared. And that's it for today's stories. If you're still here, you made it. Thanks for sticking around through the chills, the chaos, and the what even just happened moments. If you enjoyed these stories, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss a video. And seriously drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and let us know which story hit you the hardest. Or if you've ever had a close call or a near-death experience of your own, we'd love to hear it. We might even feature it in the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Oh.
Stay safe out there.